Well, hello and welcome to another in our series of Choice Words videos where we get to meet the great and the good of UK fund selection, UK fund research, find out what makes them tick. I'm Julian Marr, I'm Editorial Director of Wealthwise Media, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Dean Cheeseman, who's Managing Director of Client Investment Solutions at Mattioli Woods. Hello Dean, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed for the kind invitation.
It is my absolute pleasure. Good. I was more polite. I haven't been very polite recently. I was really trying hard. I feel I'm good now. We were off to a great start. First question then. What excites you about the current investment outlook? What gives you pause for thought?
So the current environment is one of change. It's a new era from what we've seen for much of the last 15 years or so. We've got political disruption. Obviously, a new man back in the White House. France, date stamping this, we're towards the beginning of October 25, so France is going through yet another Prime Minister. But politics shouldn't ordinarily be massively influencing markets. And at the same time, we're still on this unwind of quantitative easing. Rates are normalised. We've got very rich valuations across the two major asset classes, spreads very tight. On fixed equities, particularly in the US large cap. So what excites me is trying to understand how this plays out over the next 12 months, 36, 5 years, how to position portfolios. And the beauty of this industry is no 2 days are ever the same. And you wake up in the morning, it used to be, cracky, what's China have gone overnight? Now you go to bed wondering what Trump's said at the last moment. And the dynamic just changes. And that then feeds into what worries me, what keeps us awake at night. And it's, are we positioned correctly? Because there's an awful lot of column inches at the moment discussing parallels with the Magnificent Seven, those US large cap growth tech names, AI driven. And drawing parallels back to 99, 2000, the TMT tech bubble. Mm-hmm. And I can see some very stark parallels, but I've got no idea whether we're Q1 99, Q2, end of 99, or we're at that tipping point 2000. But this, and I'm quoting others rather than proclaiming it myself, that this is a bubble, but it does look stretched. And it's only going to take one miss on earnings, and the knock-on implication could be quite severe. So that keeps us awake, but equally that's what enthuses us, because we have to position and be dynamic and be nimble.
Very good, great start. Let's narrow in then on individual investments. What do you most look for? What do you see as red flags?
So on a manager selection piece, we look for genuine alpha. And everybody's looking for some degree of genuine alpha. And if we look at it through sort of an equity context, we are trying to identify what that persistent style that the fund manager is trying to exploit. How is he going to outperform? And our belief is fund managers have a persistent style bias. They might be growth, they might be value, they might be quality, whatever their persistent style is. But we're only going to pay for alpha. And one of the benefits of this explosion, not just of passive, but into smart beta, is we've got more and more systematically constructed, passively constructed tools at our disposal to challenge traditional fundamental. So we will do a quantitative analysis, a decomposition of a fund manager's return profile, ascertain what their persistent style is, but we can then check it against, are you adding anything above the equivalent passive construct of value? And we'll pay for alpha, but I'm not paying for repackaged beta. So by return, what are the red flags? It's a beta repackager. It's just a fund manager who will be positioned in value but isn't adding anything over and above what I can capture either systematically or passively. So it's trying to really get down to the crux of what are we paying for? We've got a fee budget, we've got a risk budget, and it's balancing those. And in that context, we want to reward genuine alpha, for which we will pay, but a red flag is if we can capture it systematically easier.
Okay, well, you mentioned style there actually, and I was wanting to talk about style drift. Clearly, there are times when it's easy to be following a particular style, as we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, there are times when it's very, very difficult. How do you deal, perhaps personally, perhaps keeping others on track with the dangers of style drift?
So again, we prefer purity. So a fund manager is back to this fundamental belief that a fund manager has a persistent style. So if you think of life in that Morningstar 3x3 grid, growth to value, large cap down to small cap, a fund manager might be large cap growth orientated. He might drift at times towards blend or come down and be a little bit anti-mega cap or towards a bit more mid cap. But in 30 years, I've only found 2 fund managers who are sufficiently schizophrenic to have jumped around that Morningstar 3x3.
Mm-hmm.
So with the understanding that a fund manager has the persistency of style, we don't really tolerate style drift. And we owned one of these, very gifted, if you like, fund managers who did move around. And we bought him for a role, US, large cap growth. He drifted and called the market beautifully towards value. But I've already got a value manager doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So he's now doubling my value bet. So yes, there's a momentum trade. We might tolerate it for a short period of time, but ordinarily style drift is, again, certainly an amber flag. Back to, what are your fundamental beliefs? Where do you think you're going to extract additional value? How are you going to earn that extra return? Why are you fishing somewhere else? Do you have the requisite skills in order to do that? So that's certainly an amber, if not a red flag at that point.
It's very interesting. Then, of course, you're doing all this, you're having to communicate with clients. What is the approach, the Matthew Wood's approach to client communications? And as a sub-question, I talk about the right type of client. What I mean by that, is attracting and nurturing the right type of client is someone who's going to stick with you through the whole investment journey, so they don't miss out on anything at the beginning or the end that might have boosted their returns.
So I think we do something slightly differently. We make the usual communications to clients. So we'll do client webinars, we'll do client presentations, we provide written market commentaries in relation to how their portfolios will have performed. And everybody's doing something similar. But we're exploring increasingly different mediums. And where I think Mattioli Woods, and this feeds in, I think, to the right client in terms of defining that. Mattioli Woods' client base is probably slightly more diversified than many of our peers. You've had the advantages of auto-enrollment, and clients who would fall into maybe the mass affluent and fall outside of many wealth managers' typical fishing ground have now gently accumulated quite material pockets of money, investable assets. And we're working very hard across the spectrum of the opportunity set of clients, not just focusing on ultra high net worth, but trying to sell our services into a much broader subset, provide those services, part of the financial planning, and then the communication is absolutely vital, because these people may not have had the traditional experiences of investment before. So there's a lot more hand-holding, there's a lot more explanation, it's a gentler communication. But what we also, I think, do better, I won't say that our peers don't, but I think we do it better than the majority, is we don't just look at the client of today. Clients sadly pass. So there is a tremendous effort at Mattioli Woods to communicate to the family and the beneficiaries of the client today who will be tomorrow. Because when that today's client sadly passes, we want to be able to continue to work with that family for generations to come. And where we're also working slightly differently to many of our peers is there's been, and maybe a throwaway sort of stereotypical response, but the advisor comes in and talks to the male. He might have been the primary earner, and the relationship is with the male. Well, sadly in this day and age, we're seeing once kids have left university, families that were held together for the sake of the kids, we're seeing more and more divorces. And one of the largest growing components of the client base, generally, not just at Mattioli Woods, are the 50, 60 something year old female. But if you've never communicated to the family, then you've got no relationship. So again, we're obviously not encouraging divorce, but we're trying to make sure that we treat the unit as a single entity and speak to all components within it. And it's then really important because when we're talking about future generations and talking about both sides, the husband and the wife, the risk profiles will naturally be different, but the investment preferences are also different. So we've got to be able to communicate and satisfy their beliefs, their objectives. It's a far broader spectrum. So the communication piece is absolutely central around not just what we're doing in the portfolio, what we think about markets now, but it's then how we subdivide that across the different component parts.
That's very interesting. I was thinking about that. There's nothing to be ashamed about. So I'm thinking about, self-interest leading to excellent service. I mean, we thought about that as a wealth-wise strapline for a while. We just dismissed it. Something else came through. No, that's really interesting. Good answer to the comms question. A more personal one now then. What was your route into investment? And if you hadn't taken that path, what do you think you'd be doing now?
So my route into investment, I didn't actually apply to university initially. I've been to a rural East Anglian secondary school. Many of my fellow students were farmers. They went off to agricultural college with the view of then joining the family farm. There was no clear path on my side. I went into accountancy only because it was a broad footing, and that was fine until I then hit tax and audit in my second year, and I decided I was never going to become an accountant. But having had a taste of various modules at college, I then did apply for a degree, did a broad brush financial services degree, and that exposed me to different aspects of financial services away from tax and audit, and it put me into investment, or it gave me exposure to investment. And from there, because I had the opportunity to write my dissertation on appraising investment portfolios using investment trusts as the data set, that was my leapfrog in as an analyst. And haven't really looked back. I've been analysing some sort of collectives ever since for 30 odd years. What would I be doing instead if I hadn't fallen into that path? I think it's teaching. And I think that's quite vocational. My mother was a teacher. Her mother was a teacher. I've loved, as my kids have grown up, coaching athletics, rugby, imparting that knowledge, coaching athletics in southwest London on a Sunday morning to an incredible breadth of young aspiring athletes, some struggling to put one foot in front of the other, struggling to even pick up a shot put, the coordination and trying to get messages as to how they can improve, seeing the light bulb go on when they get it. So I think if I hadn't gone into investment, there would have been a calling somewhere down the teaching. The beauty of Mattioli Woods is that we're HQ'd in Leicester. We have a very close relationship with De Montfort. And I'm now privileged to have the opportunity to work with their finance faculty, and I give the odd occasional guest lecture and board the students on portfolio construction or risk management. And I do enjoy that. I do get a buzz out of.
No, very interesting. I was just thinking there's plenty of Sunday mornings where I've struggled to put one foot in front of the other, so I'll be giving you a call next time. What is the biggest investment mistake you are prepared to admit to, and positive twist or learning twist? What did you learn from it?
So I've already made reference to this, that I've had exposure initially academically and then practically with investment trusts for over 30 years. They are a brilliant vehicle in that they ring fence the underlying asset, and irrespective of the flow of the market at that time, you can have a less liquid underlying, so infrastructure, renewables, whatever it might be, underlying asset class, and the fund manager, depending on liquidity, isn't being forced to try and buy more stock or redeem. And that's a huge advantage in non-institutional portfolios, which the wealth community is obviously what we're constructing for private clients. But the problem is you use it for diversification. And we touched earlier on about how rich some of the equity valuations are, how tight some of the credit spreads are. We're all looking for that diversifying asset, if as and, well, not if, but when the market rolls. But the problem with investment trusts, and where I've used them in the past and I've come unstuck, is that you put them in for the benefits of diversification because it should dance to a different return profile or a different income stream. But just when you want it to behave as an infrastructure, for example, it remembers it's got an equity wrapper around it and it behaves like equity. And the illiquidity of it seems to exaggerate the downside. So you end up with a sort of an equity on steroids. Now at Mattioli Woods, we're growing as an asset manager, or a wealth manager, I should say, and we've got 25 billion assets under advice, under management. But we're already now too big really to use closed-ended for the liquidity profile of them. But what I think if you've got the right time horizon, closed-ended are brilliant. The opportunity to access these niche sub-asset, diversifying asset classes, but you have to have the time horizon, the luxury to look through that market volatility when it will behave like an equity. And in the portfolios that we're constructing, we're not afforded that timeline.
That's an interesting, slightly depressing answer, the idea that maybe investment trusts as a sector have a slight sort of sell-by date coming up at some point. I feel like there's a small future obituary for them.
And it'd be interesting what LTAF does and whether that is the bridge and that's the halfway house. But a massive advocate for it closed-ended, but the size we are and the way they respond to the markets and the fact that we are reporting performance monthly, quarterly, we're not afforded the luxury of saying, yeah, don't worry, NAV's fine. This will bounce back.
I might get my other half, Cherry, the AIC Freelance Journalist of the Year for the 93rd time in a row on the case with an article on that one, and she'll be in touch. Yes. There we go. Outside of work, what is the strangest thing you've ever seen or done outside of work?
Outside of work. I think the strangest thing I've seen, in a previous life, before my hip went, before I had the replacement, went bionic, I would do British Miniature Fitness. I would do the occasional sort of these Tough Mudder, ridiculous assault courses. And the most ridiculous thing I've seen is a sea of people wading waist deep in mud, squealing whilst they're being gently electrocuted, having chosen to be there in the first place. So I look back on that and just sort of wonder, Dean, what the hell were you doing? And I'm sure one or two of those others were also. But it's a very bizarre way to find yourself on a Sunday morning, waist deep in mud, electrocuting yourself.
I sometimes feel as I listen back to these interviews, I don't ask all the follow-up questions I could have done. The electrocution, is that an official part of the Tough Muddering, or does it just byproduct of some electric fence trailing into the mud?
No, they very kindly just put just additional obstacles onto obstacles, and just to encourage you to move through quickly, and just I think it's motivational.
Oh, we have certainly a shortlist candidate for strangest thing. Well up there, good answer. Back in the sane world, what do you see as the best and worst case scenarios for the future of UK wealth and wealth management?
So I think UK wealth is changing dramatically. We're seeing tremendous consolidation. We've seen acquisitions, takeovers, private equity, Mattioli Woods included, come through. A lot of that is for the greater good. It brings in scale, it brings in cost savings, which can be passed on to the end client. We can build solutions, deliver outcomes at a far more cost-effective manner, delivering on value for money. The challenge within that is we need to make sure that we take all the clients with us, and that there isn't just a focus on ultra high net worth, that we are capturing the broad spectrum of people out there who do need financial planning, need that guidance. And in this rush to consolidate, and private equity have got their own motives, let's not be shy about the fact why they're getting involved. But let's make sure that it is being done for the right outcomes for the client, and that we are delivering to the breadth of the opportunity set and not just focusing on the few. And I think that's the biggest challenge as we're seeing this corporate change at the moment.
Home straight now. 2 more questions. First of which is, what advice would you have given yourself on your first day in the job?
So with the benefit of hindsight, what would I have shared with myself? Investment is not a perfect outcome, or we're not delivering perfect outcomes. We assimilate the information, whether it's macro, bottom up, portfolio construction, risk, and we construct solutions for clients in order to meet their desired outcomes. But we only do it with the best of information that we have available at the time. Mm-hmm. So what would have I told myself is it's not a game of perfect, that there are variables outside our control and that we need to get more right than we get wrong, but it is unrealistic to expect a perfect hit rate. And the very sports-focused, highly competitive individual who would have walked into that environment back in the day would have been striving for a far higher, or an expectation of constant wins. And it's a case of, okay, there's different ways to win in this game, and let's make sure that we put the client first, that we deliver the right outcome, that we manage potential losses and the downside, but you're not going to get it all right all the time.
Excellent, good answer. Last question. We call this choice words because of what you do professionally, making professional choices, but now we're going to ask for a couple of personal tips or recommendation. One would be for a book, doesn't have to be investment related, and one is a completely free hit of any advice you think our beloved audience of one would benefit from.
So the book, I've just finished this. It's relatively new off the press. It's called Rain.
Right.
It's by Barney Campbell. I won't go through the spoil the punchline, but I would urge the viewers to check this out. So it's about the story of a young aspiring officer going through Sandhurst, being appointed into his regiment, and ultimately finding himself on the front line in Afghanistan. And it is already regarded, despite it's only been out for a relatively short period of time, as one of the preeminent biographies or articulations of what it is that our incredible servicemen are putting themselves through almost day in, day out when they find themselves on the front line in this regard. It is exhilarating, it is utterly emotional, it's a roller coaster, and it's a real eye-opener for those of us who drive a desk and have never put ourselves in harm's way in that regard. And it's a tough read for a parent who has a daughter currently going through the selection process to get into Sandhurst. It's not easy reading, but I would urge anybody who has any warmth towards our armed services to read it. It is utterly incredible. And in terms of wise words, I'm going to try not to butcher this one. So this was carved on a stone behind the reception desk of a client in Aberdeen, and I was stood waiting for the meeting, and it really sort of resonated. And trying not to butcher it, it was early morning, a gazelle in Africa will wake up, and that gazelle knows that as soon as the sun comes up, it has to start running, because if it doesn't run faster than the fastest lion, it's going to get eaten. And similarly, the sun comes up, a lion will wake up and knows that it has to outrun the slowest gazelle, otherwise it's going to starve. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle, but when the sun comes up, you better be running. And how that resonates with me is a number of factors. One, each day is a new chapter. We've got a blank sheet. Yes, we've learned from the past. So it's learning from yesterday's messages, takeaways, and how do we improve. So it's about constant striving to improve, ultimately to deliver better outcomes for clients. It's about the growth and the wisdom and having that growth mindset. But it's also being that proactive, that energy that we've just got to crack on, get on with it.
Wow, very interesting choice words recommendations. Thank you for those. Thank you for some other great answers carried out in the midst of just the 4 fake fire alarms through all this, which we will have edited out for the benefit of our viewer, because that was a shock. Total professionalism. Dean Cheeseman, thank you so much for talking to us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you very much for watching. Please do look out for further Choice Words videos as they are published.